Just 3 days after the wedding, my son-in-law appeared at my door with a notary in tow. "We've already sold this house. You're moving to a care facility," he announced with a smirk that promised easy victory over an old man. But I responded calmly, "Excellent. Let's swing by the police station first. They're quite interested in the information I've sent them about you." Those words changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Thomas, Sarah, and I need our own space to start our family properly. Marcus leaned forward across the restaurant table, his wine glass catching the soft lighting. "Your house would be ideal for a young couple like us." The words struck me like ice water. I set down my fork, the wedding cake still sweet on my tongue, suddenly turning bitter. 3 days. We'd celebrated their marriage just 3 days ago, and now this conversation. "Marcus, that's my home." My voice remained steady, but my hands gripped the table edge. "I built it myself 22 years ago." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Between us, her new wedding ring catching the candlelight, the private booth at Riverside Grill suddenly felt suffocating. Other diners laughed at nearby tables, completely unaware of the bomb that had just detonated at ours. "But you're alone in such a large space," Marcus continued, his smile never faltering. "It's impractical. And at your age, wouldn't something more manageable make more sense?" At my age, 66 wasn't ancient, but Marcus spoke as if I had one. "Foot in the grave already." The champagne glass trembled slightly in my grip. "We'd take excellent care of it," he pressed on, reaching across to touch Sarah's hand. "Imagine it. Your grandchildren playing in those rooms someday." Sarah's eyes darted between us nervously. "Dad, Marcus, please, this was supposed to be a celebration." Celebration. I'd written a check for $16,000 for their wedding reception. The flowers from the ceremony still sat wilting in the center of our table, petals browning at the edges. "Marcus," I straightened in my seat, "at my age, I'm still perfectly capable of making decisions about my own property. You're welcome to stay with me for a few days while you find your own place." His confident expression flickered. Just for a moment, something cold passed behind his eyes before the charming mask returned. "Of course, Thomas, I understand completely." But his tone had sharpened. "It's just that with rental prices these days, and Sarah's salary as a teacher barely covering expenses, we'll manage, honey." Sarah squeezed his hand, though I caught the worry in her voice. Money had always been tight for her since her divorce 3 years ago. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I was hoping we could discuss this as family. After all, what's the point of holding on to such a valuable asset when it could benefit everyone? Valuable asset, not my home, not the place where I'd carried my late wife Rebecca over the threshold, where Sarah had taken her first steps, where Rebecca had spent her final days battling cancer. An asset. The background music felt mocking now. Couples at other tables shared intimate conversations, while mine fell apart in real time. A waiter glided past, refilling water glasses with practiced invisibility. The answer is no. Each word came out harder than the last. "Find your own place." Marcus leaned back, his smile turning brittle. "Well, we can certainly discuss it more. When emotions aren't running quite so high." Emotions? As if wanting to keep my own house was irrational. Sarah's face crumpled slightly. "Maybe we should head home." Home. She meant my house, where they'd been staying since returning from their honeymoon, where Marcus had already started asking pointed questions about the heating system, property taxes, neighborhood property values. I pushed back from the table, my napkin falling to the floor. The other diners blurred in my peripheral vision as blood rushed to my ears. "Thomas, wait." Sarah half rose from her seat, but I was already standing, reaching for my wallet. 2 $20 bills hit the table with more force than necessary. "Take care of the check," I managed. "I need some air." Marcus's voice followed me as I turned away. We'll talk about this later, Thomas, when you've had time to think it through properly. The restaurant's warmth pressed against my back as I walked toward the exit, each step carrying me away from my daughter's pleading eyes and my son-in-law's calculating smile. The hostess nodded politely, completely unaware that my world had just tilted on its axis. Outside, the March air bit at my face. I fumbled for my car keys, hands shaking with more than just cold. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and conflicting emotions. Sarah's worried glances in my rearview mirror burned into my conscience. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my tie felt like a noose. Inside, I loosened the silk knot and poured 3 fingers of bourbon. The study welcomed me with familiar shadows. Leather chair worn to my shape, bookshelves holding 40 years of collected wisdom, Rebecca's photo smiling from the desk corner. I sank into the chair with a grunt. Outside, streetlights painted geometric patterns across my lawn. My lawn, my house. The audacity of it still stole my breath. $16,000. I'd written that check without hesitation, watching Sarah's face light up as she described her dream wedding. The riverside grill reception, the string quartet, the elaborate floral arrangements that cost more than some people's monthly rent, all so my daughter could have her perfect day. Now her husband wanted the house too. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through wedding photos from 3 days ago. Marcus cutting cake, his hand over Sarah's on the knife. Marcus dancing with my daughter, spinning her until she laughed. Marcus shaking my hand, calling me Dad for the first time. Had he been planning this even then? The bourbon burned, but not as much as the memory of Marcus's smile when I'd refused, like he'd expected resistance, like this was all part of some larger game. My fingers found the desk drawer, pulling out the leather journal where I kept important notes. Rebecca had given it to me when I retired from structural engineering. For all those ideas rattling around, in your head, she'd said with that knowing smile. March 2025, I wrote carefully. Marcus Chen made demand for house ownership during wedding celebration dinner, claims practical concerns, mentions my age repeatedly. Sarah uncomfortable but supportive of husband. The pen felt heavy in my hand. What kind of man does this? 3 days after a wedding I paid for, he wants my home. Not asking to buy it, not suggesting we sell and split proceeds. Wants it handed over like I'm some doddering old fool ready for a nursing facility. I set the pen down and walked to the window. The street looked peaceful, porch lights glowing, televisions flickering behind curtains. Normal families living normal lives, not dealing with sons-in-law who spoke about valuable assets over wedding cake. Back at the desk, I opened my laptop. Bank statements, property records, insurance documents, numbers that represented a lifetime of careful planning. The house was worth $420,000, maybe more in today's market. My pension and savings would last another 25 years. Maybe 30 if I was careful. Marcus knew all this somehow. His questions during their engagement hadn't seemed invasive at the time, just a future son-in-law showing interest in family matters. Now they felt like reconnaissance. What's your property tax situation like, Thomas? This neighborhood must have excellent appreciation rates. Have you considered what you'll do with all this space eventually? I'd answered honestly, proud of my financial stability. Proud to show Sarah's fiancé that she came from a secure family. Rebecca's photo caught the lamplight, her eyes seeming to watch as I worked. What would she say about this situation? She'd always been better with people than me, better at reading hidden motives. Trust, but verify, she used to say. People show you who they are if you pay attention. I'd been too happy about Sarah's engagement to pay proper attention. Too grateful she'd found someone after her difficult divorce. Too relieved she seemed settled and content. The journal lay open, waiting for more observations. I picked up the pen again. Marcus Chen, age 36, business consultant. Claims to help small companies improve efficiency. Works from home, travels occasionally for clients. Never mentioned specific companies or showed detailed business knowledge during conversations. The more I wrote, the more questions emerged. What exactly did Marcus do for work? I'd never seen him in a proper office. Never heard him take business. Calls around the house. His income seemed adequate but not excessive. Yet he proposed with a 3-carat ring that must have cost $25,000. I closed the journal and reached for my phone. Tomorrow, I'd start asking questions, beginning with a call to Daniel Foster, my attorney. He'd handled Rebecca's estate, knew my financial situation, understood the value of discretion. Something felt wrong about Marcus Chen. Very wrong. The grocery bags felt heavier than usual as I pulled into my driveway Thursday afternoon. 3 days of restless sleep since that restaurant confrontation had left me exhausted. Every shadow seemed to hide new threats to my peace of mind. George Martinez straightened from his flower bed as I stepped out of the car, his weathered face wearing the expression of someone with urgent news to share. Thomas. He crossed from his yard to mine with quick steps. I need to tell you something important. I set the groceries on my car's hood. George's former detective instincts were evident in his serious tone. What's going on? Yesterday afternoon, Marcus brought someone to your house. George glanced toward my front door, then back to me. Business type in a suit, carrying a briefcase and some kind of measuring equipment. My blood went cold. What were they doing exactly? Walking around the property, measuring things, taking photographs. The guy was writing everything down in a notebook. George's eyes narrowed. Looked like a professional property assessment to me. Real thorough job. The groceries suddenly felt insignificant. How long were they there? About an hour, maybe longer. Marcus had keys. Let him inside too. George's expression showed he understood the implications. Guy spent a lot of time in your backyard, measured the fence line, took pictures of the foundation. My hands clenched into fists. Did you recognize him? Never seen him before. Professional looking though, had official looking papers. Thank you, George. This is very important information. I grabbed the grocery bags with shaking hands. Very important indeed. Inside, I dropped the bags on the kitchen counter and went straight to my study. The computer took forever to boot up, each second stretching like an hour while my mind raced through possibilities. Browser history. If Marcus had used my computer, there would be traces. The search history loaded, and my worst fears materialized on the screen. Wednesday afternoon, while I'd been at the hardware store, someone had conducted extensive research. Property appraisers, Chicago suburbs, real estate evaluation services, quick house sale companies, cash buyers, residential properties. Each search term hit like a physical blow. I scrolled down, finding more. Legal requirements, property transfer, Illinois. Power of attorney real estate transactions, elderly homeowner assistance programs. My hands trembled as I clicked through the visited websites. Professional appraisal services, companies promising quick sales for cash, legal firms specializing in property transfers for senior citizens. Marcus hadn't just brought an appraiser to my house. He'd researched the entire process of taking it from me. The chair creaked as I leaned back, processing the magnitude of his deception. This wasn't a spontaneous request made over dinner wine. This was a calculated plan. Probably months in the making. I thought about the engagement period, Marcus's careful questions about my finances, his interest in my daily routines. Had he been evaluating me like a target from the beginning? My phone buzzed. Text message from Sarah. Dad, are you feeling better? Marcus says you seemed upset at dinner. Maybe we can all talk tonight. Talk. Marcus wanted to talk again, probably to present his reasonable proposal backed by professional appraisals and legal research. I stared. At the screen, evidence clear as daylight. With trembling fingers, I reached for my phone and dialed Daniel Foster's number. This was bigger than just wanting my house. This was systematic fraud, and I needed professional help immediately. Foster and Associates, this is Jennifer speaking. My hands shook as I gripped the phone tighter. Jennifer, it's Thomas Weaver. I need to speak with Daniel immediately. It's urgent. He's with a client, Mr. Weaver. Can I have him call you back? Tell him it's about fraud, real estate fraud. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Tell him my son-in-law, Marcus Chen, is trying to steal my house. A pause. I'll get him right away, sir. The wait stretched endlessly. I paced my study, the browser history still glowing on the computer screen like evidence of a crime already committed. Thomas! Daniel's voice carried immediate concern. Jennifer said something about fraud involving your son-in-law. Marcus Chen. I forced the name through gritted teeth. He's planning to take my house, Daniel. I have proof he's been researching. How to do it legally. The silence on Daniel's end lasted too long. Marcus Chen, you said? Yes. He married my daughter 3 days ago, and now he's... Thomas, I need you to sit down. Daniel's professional tone had shifted to something more. Urgent. Give me a moment to check something in my files. I heard keyboard clicking, papers rustling, the familiar sounds of Daniel's methodical approach to legal problems. But his tone suggested this wasn't routine. Thomas, I have 4 active cases involving Marcus Chen. Each word hit like ice water. He specializes in real estate fraud, targeting elderly homeowners. The room tilted around me. Are you saying he's done this before? His pattern is consistent. Marry into families, gain trust, then use forged documents to claim property ownership. Daniel's voice had gone completely professional, like he was reading from case files. The victims are always men in their 60s or 70s, always recently widowed, always with adult children who are financially struggling. My free hand found the desk edge for support, but he just married my daughter. That's exactly his timeline, Thomas. He works fast, before victims can react or seek legal advice. Papers rustled again. How much did you know about his background? Nothing concrete. He claimed to be a business consultant, worked from home. The admission felt pathetic now. We were so happy Sarah found someone after her divorce. Thomas, you're in immediate danger. Daniel's urgency cut through my shock. Don't sign anything. Don't give him access to your financial documents. Don't let him handle any legal matters for you. What should I do about Sarah? She doesn't know what kind of man she married. First, we gather evidence. Then we protect your assets. Daniel's tone brooked no argument. Your daughter's heart can heal. Your life savings can't be recovered if they're stolen. I stared at the computer screen, at the evidence of Marcus's research. He brought a property appraiser to my house yesterday. Used my computer to research the legal process. That's his standard procedure. Professional appraisal, forged transfer documents, corrupt notary to validate signatures. Daniel spoke like he was reading from a playbook. Tell me exactly what you've observed. I described everything, the restaurant demand, the appraiser visit, the browser history, Marcus's questions during the engagement period. Classic pattern, Daniel confirmed. Thomas, I'm clearing my schedule. Can you come to my office first thing tomorrow morning? Bring every document related to your property. Deed, will, insurance policies, bank statements. Should I call the police? Not yet. We need ironclad evidence first. Daniel's experience showed in every word. Marcus is sophisticated. He's beaten fraud charges before by claiming victims willingly transferred property, and later developed memory problems. The implications stung, but I understood the strategy. One more thing, Thomas. Daniel's voice carried a warning. Be very careful around him until we meet. If he suspects you know his true nature, he might accelerate his timeline. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. My son-in-law wasn't just greedy. He was a professional predator who'd chosen me as his next victim. But I hadn't survived 40 years in structural engineering by backing down from problems. Tomorrow, Daniel and I would begin building the case that would destroy Marcus Chen's criminal career. As I reached for my safe combination, I heard Marcus's laughter from the kitchen upstairs, and for the first time since the restaurant I smiled, let him laugh while he could. The drive home from Daniel's office felt longer than usual, his warnings replaying in my mind like a broken record. Professional criminal, systematic fraud, multiple victims. The words had transformed my son-in-law from an annoying opportunist into something far more dangerous. Marcus's car still sat in my driveway when I pulled in. Through the kitchen window, I could see him and Sarah sharing dinner, their conversation animated and comfortable. The ordinary domestic scene felt like a grotesque performance now that I knew the truth. I entered through the front door, calling out casual greetings. Marcus's voice carried from the kitchen, warm and friendly, asking about my errands. The same voice that had demanded my house 4 days ago. In my study, I locked the door and went straight to the wall safe hidden behind Rebecca's portrait. The combination, 5/17/28, our wedding anniversary, had protected our most important documents for 20 years. Inside lay the foundation of my life's work. Property deed from 1983, updated will from 2023, insurance policies, investment statements, documents Marcus needed to steal my legacy. I spread everything across my desk, studying each paper with an engineer's precision. The house deed, stamped and notarized, worth $420,000 in today's market. My will, leaving everything to Sarah, updated after Rebecca's death. Bank statements showing retirement savings that had taken decades to accumulate. Marcus had access to none of this yet. But Daniel's warnings echoed. He works fast. From the kitchen came the sound of dishes being cleared. Normal married couple. Routines that masked Marcus's predatory nature. How many other families had he infiltrated this way? How many other fathers had sat in their studies, realizing too late they'd welcomed a thief into their homes? I pulled out my journal and began documenting everything with methodical precision. Each suspicious conversation during the engagement period. Every question about finances that had seemed caring, but was actually reconnaissance. Thomas, you must get tired in this big house alone. Have you considered what you'll do with all this space eventually? Sarah worries about you living by yourself. Every comment now revealed its true purpose. Evaluation of my vulnerability, assessment of my attachment to the property, manipulation of my daughter's concern for my welfare. The safe also contained Rebecca's jewelry, including her engagement ring, 3 carats, similar to what Marcus had given Sarah. Where had a struggling business consultant gotten $25,000 for a ring? I photographed each document methodically, storing copies in multiple locations. If Marcus somehow accessed the originals, I'd still have proof of ownership. The engineer in me understood redundancy and backup systems. My phone rang. Sarah, Dad, are you okay? You've been so quiet since the wedding dinner. Her voice carried genuine worry, the same concern Marcus was undoubtedly exploiting. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Marcus thinks maybe we should all sit down and talk things through. Clear the air. Clear the air. Or present his forged documents and fake appraisals backed by legal research and professional preparation. Maybe tomorrow, I said. Let me get some rest first. After hanging up, I continued my security preparations, changed all my banking pins, called my insurance company to add fraud alerts, scheduled a meeting with my investment advisor to discuss protective measures. 4 other families destroyed, Daniel had said. 4 other fathers who'd trusted their daughter's choice in men, who'd believed in family unity over suspicious caution. But I wasn't them. 40 years of problem-solving had taught me to analyze threats systematically, to prepare for failure modes. To build safeguards against worst-case scenarios, I locked the documents back in the safe and checked my watch. 9:30. Marcus and Sarah were probably settling in for the evening, planning their future in my house with my money. Tomorrow I'd begin the real battle. But tonight I had one more call to make. The bank's fraud prevention hotline answered on the second ring. First, National Security Department. This is Jennifer speaking. This is Thomas Weaver, account number 558392. I need to report suspicious activity involving my son-in-law. As I explained the situation to Jennifer, I heard Marcus's laughter from upstairs. My smile returned. Let him enjoy his last night of feeling secure. Tomorrow, his world would start crumbling, just like he'd planned for mine. 4 days of systematic research stretched ahead of me as I sat down at my computer with my first cup of coffee. Daniel had given me a list of previous victims' names, and I had 72 hours before our planned meeting with law enforcement. Marcus was still asleep upstairs with Sarah, giving me precious hours to work undetected. The first victim lived in Phoenix. Catherine Rodriguez, 71, whose daughter had married Marcus in September. By December, forged documents claimed she'd sold her house to a cash buyer for below market value. I found her on Facebook through her daughter's profile. Recent posts showed a cramped apartment, complaints about rising rent, photos of grandchildren she could no longer visit regularly. The contrast with her previous posts, a spacious ranch house, garden photos, family gatherings, told the story Daniel's files had outlined. Marcus's social media presence painted a different picture. Professional headshot, business conference, photos, testimonials from satisfied clients, but cross-referencing dates revealed impossibilities. Marcus claiming to be in Denver consulting while simultaneously honeymooning in Phoenix with Catherine's daughter. Screenshot by screenshot, I documented the contradictions. Marcus's LinkedIn showed 4 different business addresses in 18 months. His Facebook relationship status had been married to 5 different women in 3 years, each relationship lasting exactly the same timeline: quick courtship, lavish wedding, immediate housing concerns. Day 2 brought phone calls Daniel had arranged. Catherine Rodriguez's voice shook as she described her ordeal. He was so helpful at first, she said, worried about my safety living alone, offered to handle my finances so I wouldn't be stressed. Her words carried the weight of betrayal. One morning he showed up with a moving truck and eviction papers, said the house had been sold for my own good. Robert Chen in Denver had a similar story. 6 weeks after the wedding, he had papers saying I'd signed a power of attorney. The signature looked real, but I never remembered signing anything. Each conversation revealed Marcus's sophisticated operation. Professional document forgers, corrupt notaries, legal expertise that made victims doubt their own memories. The emotional devastation was consistent too. Adult children who believed their new spouse over their elderly parent. Families torn apart by manufactured confusion. By day 3, I had compiled a comprehensive timeline. Marcus's pattern was invariably identical. Target identification through dating apps or social events, rapid courtship of financially struggling adult children, marriage within 6 months, immediate housing concerns, professional appraisals, forged documents, and finally, the revelation that the elderly parent had agreed to sell their home. The most damning evidence came from a deleted social media post I'd managed to capture through Google's cache system. Posted 2 days after our wedding, Marcus had written, "Another successful acquisition. This old man won't know what hit him. Retiring early, non-property investment." The post had been deleted within hours, but I had screenshots. Marcus's overconfidence had created the perfect evidence of premeditation. I organized everything into categories. Digital proof showing timeline inconsistencies and multiple identities. Testimonial evidence from previous victims. Documentary. Evidence of forged signatures and impossible notarizations. Financial evidence tracking fraudulent transactions. Daniel called Wednesday evening to check my progress. "This is exceptional work, Thomas," he said after reviewing my preliminary findings. "Most victims don't discover the pattern until after they've lost everything." What are our next steps? Tomorrow we meet with Detective Lisa Warren. She's been tracking Marcus for 18 months but hasn't had enough evidence for charges. Daniel's satisfaction was evident. "Your research might finally give us what we need." That night, I double-checked every document, every screenshot, every victim statement. 4 days of intensive investigation had transformed me from confused homeowner to competent detective. The evidence was overwhelming, methodical, and would destroy Marcus's criminal career. As I prepared to close my laptop, one final detail caught my attention. Marcus's most recent Facebook post, uploaded just an hour ago. "Exciting changes ahead." Sometimes family means making tough decisions for everyone's benefit. The timing sent chills through me. Marcus was preparing to make his move. Probably tomorrow, when he thought I was most vulnerable. I saved the screenshot and smiled grimly. Let him try. I was ready. After 4 intense days, hunched over my computer gathering evidence against Marcus, I decided to clean the house properly. The irony wasn't lost on me, preparing my home while planning to protect it from the man sleeping upstairs with my daughter. As I moved the coffee table to vacuum beneath it, something caught the morning light. A tiny lens, no bigger than a shirt button, nestled behind the decorative ceramic bowl Rebecca had bought in Florence. My engineering mind processed the impossibility immediately. This wasn't dust or a dropped screw. Someone had placed a camera in my living room. My hands trembled as I examined the device more closely. Professional grade, motion activated, with what looked like a micro SD card slot. The installation was sophisticated, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Marcus had been recording me. The violation felt worse than his demand for my house. This was my sanctuary, the place where I'd grieved Rebecca, where I'd made private phone calls, where I'd planned my investigation, all of it captured on digital video. I fought the urge to rip the device from its hiding place. Evidence. This could be evidence if I handled it correctly, using a small screwdriver. From my toolbox, I carefully extracted the micro SD card. My computer took forever to recognize the tiny device, each second stretching as I imagined what recordings Marcus might have made. 49 video files appeared on screen, spanning 3 weeks. The earliest dated from Marcus's second day in my house. I clicked the first file with mounting dread. My own face filled the screen, talking on the phone with my insurance company about routine policy questions. The audio quality was crystal clear. The video, surprisingly sharp for such a small device. File after file showed my daily routines. Morning coffee, evening news, phone conversations with Daniel about estate planning. Marcus had been cataloging my life, learning my patterns, probably searching for information he could use against me. Then I found what he'd really been recording. File 41 showed Marcus himself standing in my living room while I was at the grocery store. He was on his phone, speaking to someone with casual confidence. "The old man is completely trusting." Marcus's voice came through my computer speakers with crystal clarity. "By the end of the month, the house will be ours. The documents are almost ready." I paused the recording, my heart hammering. Here was Marcus's voice, in his own words, admitting criminal intent. The conversation continued. "Richard, are you sure the notary stamps will pass inspection?" Richard, a name I didn't recognize, but clearly Marcus's accomplice. "These elderly targets sometimes surprise you," came the reply through Marcus's phone speaker. "He's exactly like the others," Marcus laughed. Proud, independent, but ultimately naive. He actually paid 16,000 for our wedding, made it so easy to look legitimate. My vision blurred with rage, every suspicion confirmed, every fear validated. The recording continued. And the daughter. Sarah will never believe her precious daddy over her loving husband. She's the perfect cover. Perfect cover. My daughter wasn't his wife. She was his alibi. I copied the file immediately, creating backups on multiple devices. This single recording was worth more than 4 days of detective work. Marcus's own words, clearly stating his criminal intentions, naming his accomplice, revealing his complete plan. Richard Fox, I learned from further recordings, was the corrupt notary who'd validated forged documents for Marcus's previous victims. Phone conversations between them laid out the entire operation: target selection, document preparation, family manipulation, property transfer. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. His arrogance had led him to discuss his crimes in detail, never suspecting that his own surveillance equipment would become evidence against him. I stared at my reflection in the computer screen, processing the magnitude of this discovery. The hidden camera had been meant to give Marcus an advantage, inside information about my defenses, my daily routines. Instead, his overconfidence had handed me irrefutable proof of his criminal conspiracy. I closed the laptop and reached for my phone. This evidence changed everything. It was time to stop investigating and start prosecuting. Detective Lisa Warren had been Daniel's recommendation for cases exactly like this. As I dialed the police department, I finally felt like I was moving from defense to offense. Marcus's own arrogance would destroy him. The downtown police station looked more intimidating than I'd expected as I walked through the front doors, carrying a briefcase filled with 4 weeks of evidence against my son-in-law. The hidden camera recordings from yesterday had been the final piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve, but Detective Lisa Warren had agreed to see me immediately when I mentioned Marcus Chen's name. Mr. Weaver. A woman in her early 40s approached, badge prominent on her jacket. "I'm Detective Warren, thank you for coming in." Her handshake was firm, professional, but I caught genuine curiosity in her expression as she led me toward an interview room. "I have to admit," she said, gesturing for me to sit across from her at a metal table, "I wasn't expecting much when you called. Most elderly fraud victims have very little concrete evidence." I set my briefcase on the table with deliberate precision. "Detective Warren, I spent 40 years as a structural engineer. I believe in documentation." She opened my case and began reviewing the organized folders, her eyebrows rising steadily. Social media screenshots, victim testimonies, financial records, and finally, the audio recordings from Marcus's hidden camera. After 20 minutes of careful examination, she looked up. "Mr. Weaver, this is the most comprehensive case file I've seen in 16 years of police work." Detective Warren turned to her computer, typing rapidly. "We've been tracking Marcus Chen across 4 states for 12 months. He's wanted in connection with at least 14 fraud cases." 14? The number stunned me. "How is that possible?" "He's very good at what he does." Her tone carried professional frustration. "Victims are often too embarrassed to report, and evidence is usually insufficient for prosecution." She pulled up Marcus's police file, showing me a map with red pins marking locations across Illinois, Colorado, Arizona, and California. Each pin represented a destroyed family. "I'm not embarrassed," I said firmly, "and I have plenty of evidence." Detective Warren leaned forward, her manner shifting from routine intake to active strategizing. "Mr. Weaver, you could be the key to finally stopping this man, but it would require your active cooperation in a sting operation." My pulse quickened. "What kind of cooperation?" We need you to act normally. Let Marcus proceed with his plan while we record everything for evidence." She studied my face carefully. "It means letting him think he's succeeding until we have him on tape committing the crime." The idea of pretending normalcy while Marcus plotted against me felt surreal. "You want me to let him think he's winning?" "Until we have irrefutable evidence of criminal intent. Your recordings are excellent, but we need him attempting the actual fraud." Detective Warren's experience showed in her methodical approach. "It's the only way to guarantee conviction." "What about my safety?" "We'll have officers positioned around your house. Response time under 30 seconds. She pulled out a small device no bigger than a car key fob. "Panic button. One press brings immediate backup." I held the device, feeling its weight. After 4 weeks of gathering evidence, the prospect of finally confronting Marcus directly felt both terrifying and necessary. When would this happen? "Based on your recordings, Marcus mentioned end of the month. That gives us 1 week to prepare." Detective Warren began organizing my evidence into official police folders. "We'll need to install additional recording equipment, coordinate with the district attorney's office, and brief our tactical team." "What about Sarah?" "My daughter doesn't know what she married." Detective Warren's expression softened slightly. "Family situations are always the hardest part of these cases, but protecting your daughter means stopping Marcus before he destroys more families." I thought about Catherine Rodriguez crying over her lost home. Robert Chen hospitalized from stress. 14 families torn apart by one man's greed. "Detective Warren, what do you need from me?" "Everything you've given me today is a perfect start." She stood, extending her hand again. "Tomorrow morning, my technical team will visit your house to install surveillance equipment. By tomorrow evening, we'll be ready for Marcus's next move." She walked me to the station exit. I felt the weight of our plans settling on my shoulders. 24 hours to mentally prepare for the most important confrontation I'd ever have with Marcus. "Mr. Weaver," Detective Warren said at the door, "in 16 years of police work, I've never seen a victim turn the tables this completely. Marcus Chen has no idea what's coming." I drove home, knowing that my quiet retirement had just become the final chapter of a criminal's career. The house felt different as I walked through the front door, knowing that within 24 hours it would be transformed into a crime scene. Detective Warren's technical team would arrive at 8 a.m. to install their equipment, and by evening, every word Marcus spoke would be recorded for evidence. I had 1 night to mentally prepare for the performance of my life. Sarah and Marcus were out for the evening, giving me precious hours of solitude to process what lay ahead. I sat in my study, surrounded by the evidence that had brought me to this point, and tried to imagine tomorrow's conversation. Marcus would present his forged documents with practiced confidence. I would need to react naturally, shocked, confused, gradually defeated. The performance had to be convincing enough that he'd reveal his criminal methods on camera. Morning came too quickly. At 8 a.m., sharp, 3 unmarked vans pulled into my driveway. Detective Warren emerged from the first vehicle, followed by technical specialists carrying equipment cases. "Mr. Weaver, we'll have everything installed within 4 hours," she announced, directing her team toward my house. "After that, we rehearse." I watched in fascination as the specialists worked with surgical precision. Micro cameras appeared throughout. My living room and kitchen, each device smaller than a quarter and completely invisible once positioned. Audio equipment followed. Directional microphones that could capture whispered conversations from across the room. "These cameras record in ultra-high definition," the lead technician explained, adjusting a lens behind a picture frame. "The audio system filters background noise automatically. Unless Marcus specifically looks for surveillance equipment, he won't notice anything." Detective Warren handed me an earpiece no bigger than a hearing aid. Direct communication with our monitoring station. We'll be able to guide you if necessary. Where will you be positioned? Mobile command unit across the street. Officers in neighboring houses. Backup team 2 blocks away. She showed me a tablet displaying multiple camera angles from my own living room. Response time will be under 30 seconds if you use the panic signal. By noon, the installation was complete. My familiar home had become a sophisticated recording studio. Every surface concealing equipment worth thousands of dollars. Now we rehearse, Detective Warren announced. For 2 hours we practiced likely scenarios. A detective played Marcus while I rehearsed natural responses to his manipulation tactics. Remember, your safety is our top priority, Detective Warren emphasized. Don't try to trap him. Let him reveal his criminality organically. Just be yourself. Be suspicious. Ask the questions any reasonable person would ask. So, Thomas, we need to discuss the house transfer paperwork, the detective said, role-playing Marcus's likely approach. I'm not interested in transferring. Anything, I replied. Perfect. Keep your responses natural and firm. The more he has to explain, the more evidence we'll gather. At 3 o'clock, Detective Warren tested all communication systems one final time. The earpiece crackled to life. Testing, Mr. Weaver. Can you hear me clearly? Crystal clear. Excellent. Officers are moving into position now. I watched through. My kitchen window, as neighbors I'd known for years, welcomed visiting relatives into their homes. George Martinez gave me a subtle nod from his front yard, knowing his house now contained 2 armed officers. Technical check complete, Detective, Warren reported. All cameras recording, audio levels optimal, communication systems active. The house looked exactly the same, but I knew that sophisticated equipment worth more than my car was now documenting every movement, every conversation, every breath. At 5 o'clock, Marcus's car pulled into the driveway. Showtime, Mr. Weaver. Detective Warren's voice whispered through my earpiece. Remember, we're right here with you. I touched the panic button in my pocket and watched through the front window as Marcus approached my door, carrying a manila envelope that undoubtedly contained forged documents with my signature. He knocked with cheerful confidence, completely unaware that his next conversation would be his last as a free man. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock, and I felt the tiny vibration from the communication device in my pocket, Detective Warren's signal that all recording equipment was active. Through the window, I watched Marcus climb my front steps, with another man carrying a leather briefcase, both wearing confident smiles that I now recognized as predatory. This was it. The moment 4 weeks of investigation had been building toward. I opened the door with practiced calm. Marcus, and you brought a friend. Thomas. Marcus's enthusiasm seemed genuine, which made his deception even more chilling. This is Richard Fox, licensed notary public. We have wonderful news about your housing situation. Richard Fox looked exactly like a corrupt official, middle-aged, overly formal, carrying himself with false authority. His handshake felt like touching a snake. Mr. Weaver, such a pleasure, Richard said, his voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. Marcus has told me so much about your unique circumstances. They settled into my living room with theatrical confidence, Marcus spreading documents across my coffee table like he owned the place. The hidden cameras recorded every gesture, every smirk, every calculated movement. Thomas, I have incredible news, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the same tone he'd used when proposing to Sarah. We've just completed the sale of this house. You're moving to a lovely senior facility. It's all arranged. I examined the papers with engineering precision, noting the professional quality of the forgeries. That's interesting, Marcus. Who exactly did you sell my house to? A wonderful young family. They're paying well above market value. Marcus's smile never wavered. Richard here has all the legal documentation. Richard opened his briefcase with flourish, revealing official-looking stamps, seals, and notarization equipment. "Mr. Weaver, these documents show the completed sale of your property. Everything is legally binding and properly notarized." "I don't recall agreeing to sell my house, Mr. Fox." "Sometimes elderly individuals forget these important arrangements," Richard replied, with practiced condescension. "The paperwork clearly shows your signature and consent. Perfect. They were establishing the entire fraud scheme on camera, using the exact language Detective Warren had predicted." "Well, this is certainly unexpected," I said, maintaining my role. As confused elderly victim. "Perhaps we should drive to the police station first, just to make sure everything is proper." Marcus's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "The police station? Why would we need to go there?" "They're very interested in the information I sent them about your previous house sales." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. In 10 degrees, Marcus's face went pale while Richard shifted nervously in his chair. What do you mean by previous sales?" Marcus's voice had lost its confident tone. "I mean your activities in Phoenix, Denver, and 4 other cities, Marcus. The police have been looking for you for quite some time." Marcus stood abruptly, the forged documents scattering. "You're talking nonsense. Richard, tell him these documents are completely legal." "Marcus, what is he talking about?" Richard's professional mask was cracking. "You said this was a clean operation." "I mean that Detective Lisa Warren has 49 recordings of you discussing your criminal plans, Marcus." I remained seated, watching their panic build. "Including your conversation with Richard about forged notary seals." Richard went white. "Marcus, you said his house was clean. You never mentioned police investigations." "Shut up, Richard." Marcus grabbed the documents, heading for the door. "This old man is confused. He doesn't know what he's talking about." But the sound of car doors slamming outside made him freeze. Mid-step, through the window, unmarked police vehicles surrounded my house, officers positioning themselves at every exit. Marcus turned back to me, his predatory confidence replaced by desperate fear. "What have you done?" I pressed the panic button in my pocket and said calmly, "I protected my home from thieves, Marcus. Something you should have considered before you decided to target the wrong engineer." The front door burst open and Detective Warren stepped through with 3 uniformed officers, their badges gleaming under my living room lights. "Marcus Chen," she announced with professional satisfaction. "You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, elder abuse, conspiracy, and interstate criminal enterprise." Marcus stood frozen in the center of my living room, still clutching the forged documents that would now serve as evidence of his crimes. "This is ridiculous." Marcus's confidence cracked completely. "Thomas, tell them this is a family misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding, Marcus, was thinking you could steal my house." I remained seated, watching justice unfold with engineering precision. Richard Fox had already raised his hands in surrender, his briefcase open to reveal the tools of their criminal trade. "Officers, I want to cooperate fully," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't know about his previous crimes." "Mr. Fox, you're also under arrest," Detective Warren replied. "Your cooperation will be noted in your file." "Richard, don't say anything," Marcus shouted as officers moved to secure him. "They can't prove anything." But they could prove everything. The surveillance cameras had captured every word, every gesture, every incriminating admission. As Marcus raised his hands for handcuffs, I felt the satisfaction of a complex engineering project reaching successful completion. "Sir, we need you to hand over those documents," one officer commanded. Marcus's last act of defiance was attempting to tear up the forged papers. 2 officers stopped him immediately, preserving evidence that would send him to federal prison. "These papers are private family business," he protested. "These are evidence in multiple felony cases across 4 states, Detective Warren corrected, carefully collecting each document for the evidence chain. Through my front window, I watched neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. George Martinez stood in his yard with arms crossed, nodding approval. The quiet suburban street had become a crime scene, and the entire community was witnessing Marcus's downfall. "Mr. Weaver, for the record," Detective Warren said, "did these men attempt to fraudulently claim ownership of your house using forged documents?" "Yes, Detective, using fake signatures, corrupt notary seals, and systematic intimidation tactics." "He's lying." Marcus's desperation was complete now. This was a legitimate family arrangement. I was helping an elderly man who can't manage his own affairs. The irony was perfect. Marcus's final defense was exactly the condescending attitude that had motivated me to fight back so methodically. "A judge will determine the legitimacy," Detective Warren replied, leading Marcus toward the door in handcuffs. Richard's cooperation began immediately. "Officers, I have information about other operations, other targets Marcus was researching. I want to help prevent more crimes." "Smart choice, Mr. Fox," Detective Warren said. "Full cooperation might reduce your sentence from 15 years to 5. As the police cars loaded their prisoners, media vans began arriving. Word had spread quickly through the neighborhood that a major fraud operation had been exposed by an elderly resident's detective work. "Mr. Weaver," a reporter called. "From behind police tape, how did you discover this criminal scheme?" 40 years of engineering taught me to analyze problems systematically," I replied. "When something doesn't make sense, you investigate until it does." Detective Warren returned as the crowd dispersed. "Outstanding work, Mr. Weaver. This arrest closes cases in 6 states. You've probably saved dozens of families from similar fraud. What happens next?" "Trial in about 10 weeks. With your evidence and today's recordings, conviction is virtually certain." She handed me her card. "The district attorney will want to discuss your testimony, but this case is as solid as they come." I looked at my house, finally secure again, no longer under threat from criminal predators. The surveillance equipment would be removed tomorrow, returning my home to normal, but I would never be the same person who'd been surprised by Marcus's demand 4 weeks ago. "Detective Warren," I said, "thank you for believing an old man's suspicions were worth investigating." "Mr. Weaver," she replied with genuine respect, "you didn't just help yourself. You stopped a career criminal who was destroying families across the country. That's something to be proud of." As the last police car disappeared down my quiet street, I realized that while this battle was won, the war for justice was just beginning. Marcus's trial would be the final chapter in a story that started with his arrogant demand for my house. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, I would sleep peacefully in my own bed, in my own house, protected by my own intelligence and determination. 10 weeks had passed since Marcus's arrest, and I walked up the granite steps of the Cook County Courthouse, carrying the same briefcase that had helped convict him. The May morning was crisp, sunshine warming my face as I prepared for the final confrontation. Detective Warren waited by the courthouse entrance. She smiled as she saw me approaching. "Ready for the final chapter, Mr. Weaver?" "More than ready," I replied, feeling the weight of justice in my briefcase. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with activity. Marcus sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his confident swagger replaced by the hollow stare of a man facing decades in prison. Richard Fox had already pleaded guilty in exchange for testimony against his former partner. But the most important sight was Sarah, sitting in the front row behind the prosecution table. She'd filed for divorce within a week of Marcus's arrest, reclaiming her maiden name and her dignity. When our eyes met, she smiled with the same warmth I remembered from her childhood. Judge Rebecca Thompson called the court to order. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're here today to determine the guilt or innocence of Marcus Chen on charges of interstate fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and criminal conspiracy. The prosecutor's opening statement laid out Marcus's criminal empire systematically. 14 victims across 6 states, over $2 million in stolen property. A pattern of targeting elderly homeowners through marriage fraud spanning 4 years. The evidence will show, the prosecutor concluded, that Marcus Chen is not an opportunistic criminal, but a systematic predator who destroyed families for personal profit. Marcus's defense attorney attempted damage control. Ladies and gentlemen, my client made poor choices, but he's not the mastermind the prosecution claims. He was manipulated by others into these unfortunate situations. I almost laughed. Even facing life in prison, Marcus couldn't accept responsibility for his own actions. The prosecution's case unfolded with mathematical precision. Victim after victim testified about Marcus's identical methods: quick courtship, immediate housing concerns, forged documents, corrupt notarization, family destruction. Catherine Rodriguez from Phoenix spoke through tears about losing her home of 42 years. Robert Chen from Denver described the stress-induced heart attack that followed his eviction. Each story was identical, each family devastated by the same systematic predator. Then came the audio recordings from Marcus's own surveillance camera. The courtroom fell silent as his voice filled the room. The old man is completely trusting. By the end of the month, the house will be ours. Marcus's face crumpled as he heard his own words condemning him. There was no defense against his own. Recorded confession. Mr. Weaver, the prosecutor called, please take the stand. I walked to the witness box with steady steps, feeling the weight of not just my own case, but all the families Marcus had destroyed. Mr. Weaver, please describe the events of March 28th. The defendant arrived at my house with forged documents claiming I had sold my property, I said clearly. He demanded immediate eviction and threatened nursing home placement if I didn't comply. How did you respond? I suggested we visit the police station, where I had already reported his criminal activities based on 4 weeks of investigation. Marcus's attorney attempted cross-examination. Mr. Weaver, isn't it possible this was simply a family misunderstanding? Counselor, I replied with engineering precision, systematic criminals who target elderly victims across multiple states don't create misunderstandings, they create federal cases. The courtroom erupted in quiet laughter. Even the judge smiled. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. The verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. Judge Thompson's sentencing was swift and merciless. Mr. Chen, you've systematically targeted vulnerable elderly citizens for financial exploitation. This court sentences you to 14 years in federal prison with full restitution to all victims. Marcus's legs gave out as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. The confident predator who demanded my house 3 months ago was now a broken man facing more than a decade behind bars. Richard Fox received 6 years with possibility of parole. His cooperation noted, but not excused. Outside the courthouse, Sarah hugged me tightly. Dad, I'm so proud of how you protected not just yourself, but all those other families. Sweetheart, you loved someone who deceived professionals for years. That shows your good heart, not poor judgment. How can you forgive me for bringing him into our lives? Because you're my daughter, and you deserve someone who values the wonderful person you are. Detective Warren joined us on the courthouse steps. Mr. Weaver, this case will be taught in police academies. You've shown that age brings wisdom, not vulnerability. As Sarah and I drove home together, she reached over and squeezed my hand. Dad, what's next for you? I thought about speaking engagements for elder fraud prevention, about helping other victims find their voice, about using my engineering mind to solve problems beyond just my own. Whatever comes next, I said, I know I can handle it. At 66, I had learned that protecting family requires not just love, but strategic thinking, careful preparation, and unwavering determination. Sometimes that combination is exactly what justice needs most. My house was safe. My daughter was healing. And Marcus Chen would spend the next 14 years remembering the old man who refused to be his victim. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in this situation? How do you balance love and accountability? Let me know what time it is where you are right now. Thank you for watching.